horses in front of people.
Still, Monty believed that anyone could learn his system, and he deliberately geared it to the average horse and the average rider. Better horses and riders would simply learn it more quickly, and the best would be inspired to do even more.
He was one of the first people to scientifically explain kind of how horses' foot falls, especially at a canter. The same thing with the lead change and all the different. He really got me thinking about the science of it, the dynamics. You know, like let's analyze it from just a physics point of view. So, you know, in my first book I wrote, I showed all the things with the footfalls and leads and lead changes, how to push a horse and all that kind of stuff. That's where I got it from.
Not everyone was so open to Monty's ideas. I mean, he had ridden thousands of horses on race tracks and polo fields and jump courses, but that didn't count for much with some of the hardened ranch cowboys that he met.
He literally told most of them they didn't know how to ride. He was talking from an experience this wide, and from that experience they didn't know how to ride. They were talking about this experience this wide that they were damn good in. And they didn't understand that they didn't know how to ride, because they did. They could do a job. They were paid for that.
In Monty's time in the Western world, there was simply a lot of ignorance about riding.
He's told me several times when he was a kid and was talking about leads, some of the old cowboys would say, well, Western horses don't have leads.
Coming up next, the basic handle, Monty's way of teaching riding, and the balanced ride saddle he designed. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
My name is Monty Foreman. Some folks say I'm the most controversial author ever to latch on to Western horsemanship. Well, I don't know. Horsemanship has been a controversial subject down through the ages. Much of its action is faster than the eye. However, we can slow down the action with motion picture photography.
Monty Foreman was a trailblazer in the field of riding and handling horses, a horse scientist who brought to the Western world essential riding concepts seen in racing, jumping, polo, and even bronc riding. He called what he taught the basic handle, and it revolved around 13 building blocks upon which all advanced riding is built. He called these move basics. The turn on the forehand, the side pass, leads, posting at the trot and the natural depart to the correct lead, the drop to trot lead change, the natural flying lead change, balanced stops, the roll away from the lead, the same lead roll and out the opposite lead, also known as the same and out, the same lead roll, the 360-degree roll, the 180-degree roll to the correct lead, and spins. Monty was most interested in developing maneuvers done at the lope or faster, because it was here that the rider had the most impact, for better or for worse, on the horse's performance. This was especially true of changing leads. Monty wanted horses to be able to change leads without changing directions, a maneuver used in dressage.
Most Western people don't teach their horse to change leads on a straight line. And there's a dozen ways, you know. Many of them teach out of a counter canter, and some of them will try and send their horses in a serpentine across the arena and change, and others try to change out of a circle. But for a true lead change, off any stride you ask, then I think the straight line is the answer, and it is the dressage change leads.
Monty was the first one that started teaching people to stand up slightly, put a new leg on the horse, then turn the nose. And horses just automatically would start changing leads rather than trying to neck rein the horse into a lead change.
Of all the move basics, Monty's balanced stops look the most different to modern riders.
The Foreman stop was a hard sliding stop, except it was a ranch sliding stop, so you can't slide more than 5 or 6 feet, or the cow would be in the next county.
The rider's position was different too, farther forward, more over the horse's center of gravity.
He maintained you could stay up there and the horse could stop better if you're in a forward seat because you didn't weight his rear end down, you know, but the horse had more freedom to get his rear end under him.
The Foreman balance stop required the rider to tug and release the reins or check the horse 3 times during the stop.
It was a pull 3 times. 1, 2, 3. As fast as you could pull him, but it had to be 3 times. And he maintained by doing that, you held that horse into the ground.
To start to teach the foreman stop, you start people easily at the trot, and you tell them to check just when one front foot strikes the ground.
Then you move up to the lope, again checking when the front end hits the ground. Sitting more forward was a part of the formula that Monty derived from other types of riding.
A horse needs 2/3 of his weight underneath him to give you a good, hard sliding stop. A jump horse, in order to jump 6 feet, needs 2/3 of its weight on the hind end. So there's a split-second difference of whether you ask a horse to jump or whether you ask him to hold into a stop. Okay, and so it's hard to do because if you're off, now you're in a very vulnerable position. You can go flying over the horse's neck if you don't understand when to check with a horse. Okay. And so in today's world, most people sit down, lean back, which is a defensive situation, and then work on the footing to help the stop.
Monty Foreman was an innovator in the way people rode Western horses, and he also realized that the saddle could help or hinder the process.
Horses are packing about 200 pounds of rider and equipment on the average, and where they support that weight has a strong effect on how their performance is. He discovered that with jockeys and hunter-jumper riders and dressage riders, the horses perform better if the weight is further forward up in what we call the rider's groove, where you would ride if you're riding bareback. So he started designing a saddle that would allow him to ride up behind the withers there rather than having a horse support all his weight back on the loin area, which is the weakest part of their back.
The first riding quality we need is that the stirrups hang up front of the girth in the rider's groove, close to the horse's elbows. To make the saddle stay on the horse's back for regular usage, the rigging must be moved forward and set way up high. The rigging must be spread out, bulkless as possible, and stronger than any other rigging. Balanced ride seats are low in front. Buckles must be below the rider's calf in order to let his knee through the lower calf fit close around the horse's barrel. This is where the grip and security are. The fender and stirrup leathers work smoothly over the rigging and do not catch or get back into the horse's flanks. If you want to stand, you can acquire more security here than you've ever felt before.
We knew where a saddle should fit, but the stock world didn't have that kind of a saddle. So he went to working on it, and that was very costly, very time-consuming, and made a lot of enemies in the process.
It took 12 years out of Monty's life and $17,000 out of his pocket to develop the Foreman balanced ride saddle, and people noticed.
The saddle that Linda and I have developed, a saddle we call the Fusion saddle, we got our initial concepts from his balanced ride saddle. For the kind of things that Monty was trying to share with the world, I think it was a great innovation.
But Monty had a problem. He had a good design, but he was not a saddle maker. Fortunately, in 1954, he met a young couple with similar goals who were already in the business of making saddles, Slim and Johanna Fallis.
By the end of 3 days, we were not only brain overloaded, but we were convinced he knew what he was talking about. So he went out of there with a signed contract for us to build his balanced ride saddle. And that lasted for 30 years.
The Fallis balanced saddle is still being made today with the same key features that Monty and Slim designed into it. Slim and Johanna's son, John, continues this family tradition. Monty Foreman died March 4th, 1987. He wasn't particularly wealthy, and he wasn't as well known as he should have been. But he left an indelible impression on some of today's finest horsemen.
Everybody has a certain thing that's their message, and his message was clear and true. It was about the dynamics of horsemanship. And I'm one of the biggest fans of all time of the things that Monty Foreman did.
During his day, if you wanted to talk about an all-around horseman, he's the best there was. He's just a great horseman. 20 years ahead of his time.
Monty was always very proud of saying, we don't know that what we're teaching today is the best, but it's the best that we know of today, and maybe tomorrow we're going to teach something else.
Today, more than 2 decades after Monty Foreman's death, his work is carried on by a handful of his students, most notably Patrick Wise and Ron McLaughlin. His book and films are still available, but with each passing decade, his memory fades a little bit more. Fortunately, Monty Foreman's ideas are here to stay.